All right, let's start. We are at the end of a long day, very interesting, a lot of, I mean, for me, I mean, I learned a lot of things. I met people that I normally do not meet in my line of business, which is more like forest ecology, and so it's very interesting. We are going to have a closing plenary panel, and I have a script that tells me that the speaker takes seats in front of the auditorium. They are here already, so I don't have to. And I'm appearing on stage. Here I am. And I'm introducing Melissa Moy, who is going to be the moderator for the panel. And I exit the stage, so I will do. So Melissa, if you want to introduce your panelists.
So I understand that I'm now a member of the family, so I would like to thank C4 and the World Bank for giving me this opportunity. Robert actually didn't say where I work. My name is Melissa Moy, and I work for the World Wildlife Fund. And so my task was very challenging, which was basically to try to synthesize with the panel what we learned today. And then I actually think there's some things that I didn't really hear. And so speaking for a conservation organization, I can say that I didn't hear a lot about biodiversity. So this is an excellent prop to remind me of that, to remind all of us. I did hear some inspiration, and in fact, I loved Minister Pohl's reference to why, or how to convince people of the value of forest restoration, because it's a matter of life for her small but very important country. And to me, that's an excellent starting point for this panel. I also think that we were inspired at the beginning by Jennifer Price's comments regarding knowing and owning your role within the sustainable finance ecosystem. And one of the reasons, in fact, that this panel is as diverse as it is because each of us play different roles. And I think we saw in the last Dragon's Den that for NGOs, it can be quite challenging to figure out how to develop an investment proposition. I think I heard a few other things that I'm taking away, and I'm sure others of you have heard some things that you'll remember. But Jason from Permian's comment on Red Plus about the darkest hour heralds the dawn. And I didn't attend the Red Plus session, but I heard that it was kind of dark, so maybe there's something to be talked about there. I also heard Christian refer to an economic wall around protected areas. And I come from more of the protected area financing side of things. A lot of people from the Conservation Finance Alliance, and Dave Myers was here, focus on that, and there are links between these worlds. On blended finance, I think we learned an awful lot about the enabling regulatory environment that we need, from the World Bank's example on mangroves in Vietnam. And there was definitely a call for dedicated technical assistance facilities. So we have an excellent closing panel. I'm going to introduce each one of them one by one and then have them tell their stories, but then try to actually reflect on what they've learned today. And then we'll have a few questions just to kick off, but I'd like you all to think about any kind of closing points that you've been dying to make, or questions you want to ask the panel. And we know that this is kind of the silly hour where you're ready to go to drinks. And so let's keep this snappy, no long statements. So we're going to begin with Charles Batte, who is, in fact, a youthful entrepreneur, and in fact got his start at the age of 20 when he grew a small-scale farm to a business employing 50 people. And Charles leads Tree Adoption Uganda, which is an NGO that seeks to tackle deforestation and youth unemployment through landscape restoration activities like planting trees and agroforestry. So over to you, Charles.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, just to continue with what Melissa has just mentioned, our work is mainly focused on building communities where both people and nature flourish. And we are doing this using two programs. One is agroforestry centered, and our approach involves sitting down with individual household farmers and asking them to vision what they want their landscape to look like in years to come, how they think we can make it as resilient and continuously productive as possible. And one of the actions we've developed from this is the farmers have told us it is more helpful for us to plant trees along the boundaries of their gardens. Now that does two things. One, it protects their land from encroachers. Two, when the trees grow, provide protection for the crops being grown on the garden. But thirdly, it arouses self-motivation, an intrinsic motivation for the farmer to actually do conservation, to take on agroforestry. Which brings me to the issue of incentives. We feel, or we've learned, that this approach builds an intrinsic motivation and takes away the need to incentivize the farmer. The farmer understands that he has the ability to change his reality, to improve his livelihood, and so invests his time and energy in this reforestation activity. We finance this using corporate gifting models. So for each and every tree that we plant with the smallholder farmers, we've built an application, a mobile phone application, together with our partners at EcoMatcha, which is called Tree Coder. We take a picture of each tree that is planted, and the app records its GPS coordinates, the species name of the tree, and also the farmer who is planting this tree. And this information is provided to corporate companies who can convert each of these trees into a certificate. When you have loyal customers, you can give them these certificates as a way of rewarding them. For example, when you have participants at a conference like this one, you could send each of them a certificate of a tree to say, GLF planted a tree in your name in Uganda because you attended this conference. So it kind of perpetuates the conversation about restoration, conservation, etc., generates an income for the farmer, and also gives back to the environment. The other way we are doing this is through our Tree Capital program. So when most of commitments are made, say in Bonn, when we say 350 hectares of land are going to be restored, it's young people who get really excited because they want to go plant a tree, take a picture, tweet about it, Facebook about it. But then these young people do not actually have access to financing to carry on these activities. So in the households we are working with, Tree Adoption Uganda is asking individual households to identify a young person, maybe a 15-year-old, and the household will demarcate a piece of land, whatever piece they can afford. Tree Adoption Uganda supports them in planting commercial trees. And the idea is that at the end of 5 or 7 years, when these trees are harvested and sold, the young person earns an income, uses it as startup capital to set up something small for themselves. Tree Adoption Uganda takes a cut of 30% from this, and the young people in their households takes a cut of about 70%.
Now I'd like to introduce David Brand, who's the founder and CEO of New Forest. It's a $3.5 billion forestry management company that manages forestry investment funds on behalf of institutional investors. He's also on the board of Forest Trends and a trustee of the Center for People and Forests.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Great to be here, and it's been a pleasure listening to all the innovations and interesting ideas here today. So I'm going to come back to maybe at the start of the day when we talked about how do we get funding into sustainable landscapes. And I think there was a lot of interesting models from the World Bank. And I think Michael Jenkins was saying, how do we make this an asset class? And well, we're an investment management business, so we live in an asset class world. We operate in the forestry asset class, and you know, our main customer base is pension funds, large pension funds, reinsurance companies, medical benefits trusts, who have long-term liabilities that they're trying to match with their investments. And so what is an asset class? An asset class is kind of an investable universe of assets that have particular financial characteristics, and that might be volatility, cash yield, capital appreciation, and so on. Forestry is an asset class that has particular characteristics. 70% of the return comes from the process of biological growth. Trees are long-dated assets. They don't have a single maturity point like a field of tomatoes, so you have very low volatility in terms of the valuations of the assets. And so the pension funds, they look at the different types of assets, whether it's stocks or bonds or infrastructure or hedge funds or forestry or agriculture, and they look at what's optimal for their portfolio in terms of delivering on their liabilities to pay people's pensions or whatever that might be. And so in some ways, you want very specific asset classes, and that's what we've tried to do as a business. We've set up 3 strategy architecture where we invest in forestry in Australia, New Zealand, in the US, and in Asia. And so I'll just talk for a minute about our investment program in Asia, which was somewhat pioneering in that it was kind of the first time a fund had been raised with different pension funds and institutional investors to go into forestry in Southeast Asia. We closed that fund in 2013-14. We've invested in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Laos. And I would say that what we had to do was make a core forestry asset that fit with what the pension funds and so on wanted in their portfolio. And then alongside that, if you take, say, a 50,000 hectare concession and maybe 20,000 hectares is plantation, the other 30,000 hectares may be wetlands and natural vegetation, and we just carry that for conservation purposes alongside the plantation. Then secondly, because you have a lot of community relations and you want positive community relations, you want to have the shared value as an outcome, we take on things like community forestry, job creation, entrepreneurship development, outgrower schemes, and build that in as well around our investments. And so in a sense, we're taking on these additional areas of social and environmental and conservation benefits, but our core is still delivering on that forestry asset class. And I think if we think about sustainable landscapes, that is one way to think about how we can attract institutional capital, which is kind of the large-scale capital, is by having some of those core assets and then linking them with the other social and environmental outcomes.
Great, thanks. Minister Lina Pol is the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of El Salvador, and she's been active in the management of environmental and rural development funds and served as local director for the Heinrich Böll Foundation.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and again, thank you for inviting me here to the great family, to the Global Landscape Forum. As I stated today in the morning session, it is not possible just to talk. You have to think and you have to act to make the restoration program successful. However, it has meant a lot for El Salvador, for my country, to discuss our restoration program, to listen about the successful stories and also the failed stories, to know what our role is and to know what is not our role. For example, our program is not a program driven by a ministry, not even by the government. It's a national program where all the actors are involved. But it's true, to implement a restoration program, you must think first. That's the first point that I want to highlight. establish a general action framework and define the instruments, the regulations, the incentives. We did this with a lot of friends, with the whole family. UICN, for example, has played a central role. The World Bank, the World Research Institute, countries such as the United States and Germany. We developed a program based on information with a very high resolution. It was important for us, the resolution, because we need to go to the local level, to the farms. With LiDAR technology, we can provide them maps with different criteria, the main areas that we need to restore, and the technique that they should use, the actor that should be involved, and the inputs can be used. We have progress in a monitoring system that allows us to define if we are on the right track or we have to make some changes. We build also an institutional framework with environmental and sustainable cabinet and a council that involve all the stakeholders in the country that are interested in this process. We also elaborate an economy and financial analysis of restoration, a cost-benefit analysis, showing that it's more convenient from an economic and financial point of view to invest in restoration and recover of critical or key ecosystem service in the territory. We also established a national fund, a national financial mechanism for restoration, we call FIAES, and it's an organization that specializes in the paperwork, in management and investment of financial resources designated for environmental conservation projects. Realizing also education and awareness restoration activities with the participation of diverse actors. We have also identified relevant areas to be restored that protects and increase the operational lifespan of infrastructure, especially strategic economic assets such as hydroelectrical dams, ports, water treatment plants, and infrastructure for water capture and distribution for the cities. Even though the 90% of the financial to the climate available in the climate funds from Central America cannot be used in these efforts. Even though we are one of the most vulnerable countries around the world, according to the late IPCC report. El Salvador do not have large forest area. And despite of being an extraordinary example in the world of development, a well-designed restoration program, its implementation is limited by doing it only with national funds. We are moving forward, but there is an international commitment to reduce the vulnerability of those countries that, like mine, El Salvador, are not responsible for this situation but suffer from its most devastating effects. And besides, it is an extraordinary laboratory, so that as a planet, we progress in global restoration program with greater success. We learn all the time that we are, the landscape restoration, a huge mosaic with different situations, but we don't do it in a global manner. We just be in the hot spots in the big mass forest area. And what about El Salvador? An extraordinary place that you can invest. Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, I'd like to introduce Chief Tashka Yawanawa, excuse me for the pronunciation, who is the chief of the Yawanawa people in Acre province in the Brazilian Amazon. As an indigenous leader, he has developed new approaches to business partnerships, emphasizing mutual benefit and maintaining cultural heritage.
Thank you. We really need careful what we're asking for. I remember 4 years ago, I was in Paris for an event there. I saw Landscape Forum. Was there. I said, oh my God, I want to be there one day. And 2 years ago, I was here walking by the street with my wife. I say, someday I want to go inside this building, say something for these people. And today I'm here. And yeah, thank you. As you know, no different from other indigenous people. The Yawanawa, from immemorial time, we protect, we recover, we take care of the nature and the Mother Earth. And all the service we do, we never been compensated for that. We always do naturally. And the Yawanawa live in 200,000 hectares of the land. Every day, we hunt and fish. We don't have a supermarket. We don't have nothing else. We do every day. We depend on 100% to live in that. From 60 years ago, we are planning. We organize different workshops, what we call the Yawanawa Life Plan. How was the Yawanawa see the future in 50 years? The same thing we did in 2000. In 2000, when I come to the community to become the young chief of the Yawanawa people, we did 3 reflections. How was the Yawanawa in that moment? How was Yawanawa in the past? What we eat, what we believe, what we dress it. And how we was in that moment, and what we want to do in 10 years. After 15 years, we accomplished everything we was planning. And that time, the Yawanawa land was about 90,000 hectares of the land. And we revised our land, we double. Now we have 200,000 hectares of land. In 2000, the Yawanawa cultural and spiritual manifestation was almost disappearing. We recover everything. The Yawanawa today is proud to be Yawanawa. We organized the first Indigenous Week celebration as an example of the Yawanawa today. In whole Amazon, people organizing to that. And we created a business model. When we talk about the business, a lot of people say, no, indigenous people don't know how to do business. That's wrong. We Yawanawa have this 27 years in partnership working with Avida Corporation, Inc. We sell this red color. The Yawanawa, we use the red color to paint our face and the body. Every time when the Yawanawa paint their face with red color, they want to show happiness, beauty, and protect with bad spirit. And the Vida Corporation get this ink and they become this lip scar that the woman like to use it and paint the hair with red things like, I don't know about this beautiful thing of the women's. But Avida do that. And also they help the Yawanawa protect the land and strengthen the Yawanawa culture. And what is very funny because in 2016, we organized a workshop with the children in the Yawanawa community. And I get the whole children for the community. I said to them, design, draw, how you can see yourself and the environment for the next 10 years. And I have some Canadians, boys there. I have a family of Canadians. I have like 3, 5 kids there visiting me. I said, okay, guys, let's participate. Also, you're going to design how you see yourself in 10 years. I divide the Canadian boys and the Yawanawa boys. When they finish, they bring me back the design. The Yawanawa kids design, they jump in the lake. They design a lot of forests. They design in the river, hunt and fish. And they say, okay, Canadian guys, bring to me your design. They bring to me a lot of Walmart story. They have a lot of McDonald's. They have a lot of road. I say, oh my God, that's very contrast of the design. And when we designed this Yawanao life plan is create a model where indigenous people can live in their territory and also they have income, but without destroying the land, without destroying the culture. I think the money and technology build beautiful things and also destroy beautiful things. Depend how we can use it that. Go on? Okay, that's very true.
Finish your sentence.
Okay, and to take care about the Mother Earth, and not just responsibility for indigenous people, is responsibility also for business people. Because how you going to become an ugly place where you do business? You need to do a safe, beautiful environment for everybody to live in. I think not just to see a place. We are not here in vacation. We are living here. And the indigenous peoples, as the people, they always open to do business. But they need respect, but they need time to do and dialogue with. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So now we'll have some questions for the panel, but I just want to remind you, if you have any points you'd like to make or questions, start thinking of them now. So Charles, how can large institutional and public investors support bottom-up localized solutions to landscape management challenges?
Yes, thank you. I believe the first thing we need to work upon is changing the mindset of the investor who is an investor in landscape restoration. One thing that I've not seen here at the forum is a smallholder farmer. Many a times we miss the fact that actually the primary investor in restoration is a smallholder farmer. What appears to increase or make the investment in restoration to be too big is because we fail to cost the investment made by a farmer. If today I want to plant 1,000 trees, I will ask for $1,000. But I can't use the $1,000 to buy land, buy the trees, pay for labor, and have all of them planted. I will go to a smallholder farmer and say, I want to use your land to plant so many trees. This will be the benefit. The smallholder farmer is going to provide me with land, and he's going to look after those trees until they grow. Now, if you were to monetize that amount of labor, land provided, you would actually find that whatever he or she is investing is equal to what an impact investor, a venture capitalist would be investing in restoration. So big corporations need to appreciate that smallholder farmers are not just passive participants in restoration, but they are actually equity partners. And when we work with them, we're not simply helping them. They are bringing an investment on table that has to be appreciated, that has to be rewarded after we harvest whatever we are planting or restoring on their land. Then secondly, restoration activities can be deceiving. If I said we've planted 10,000 trees, it sounds very cute and very impactful. But where are the trees? You can't see them. And that is the very big problem for investors. When I go to talk to people and say, I want $10,000 to plant so many trees, they're always worried. How will I know that these trees were planted? The trees take a very long time to grow. How will I see that actually my money is being put to the use I'm being told it's going to be used to? So large corporations that are here need to take time to work with we smaller organizations on the grassroots to see how do we use the data that organizations at the grassroots are collecting to build scientific evidence that can give investors confidence and trust to say that if I give these guys $10,000, it's actually going to translate into so many trees. And finally...
So Charles, why don't we move on to one of the investors? Sure. So, David, you just heard from Charles, and I'm wondering how, in your view, we can actually encourage private investment. And you might want to just think about what Charles just said.
Well, I guess if you want to look at investment, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and I guess I come from a particular part of the investment capital markets, because it is a capital market with multiple different sources of capital, from the farmer who's planting his own tree and reinvesting some of his own earnings to the large institutional investors that are developing effectively global portfolios of assets. I guess, what I think could be helpful is to have some of that institutional capital bringing in the technology, the market building capacity, the managerial skills, and then linking that, networking that with community programs and helping to build out economic development and a platform where people can, develop their own businesses and their own, improve their own livelihoods. I think alongside that as well, we could see ways to support restoration, conservation work, and potentially this is where we bring in the idea of blended finance, where there's a core commercial investment, but then linked with that are some of these other outcomes that are benefiting communities and creating the support for the environmental restoration work.
Thanks. Minister Pohl, so what's your perspective on the financing of landscape restoration programs for countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change?
A few years ago, very few years ago, with not an hurricane, but tropical depression with no name, we lost 6% of our GDP. When I said in the Bone Challenge that our goal was half of the country, everybody said that you're crazy. And actually I am a little bit. But I said, no, I mean, it's not an option. We have to do it. If we need to be a country with a future, not for our children, for ourselves, I mean, in a few years or more, we need to restore the country. But we also learn that that can be just because of the government want to. Not even just the farmers want to. Everybody has to be involved. And the private sector is not a problem, it's the solution. It's actually, you need to involve the private sector in this kind of work. If you don't do it, if you don't have the arguments to explain why you have to restore the ecosystem services, or if you don't have the instruments like your program that is fantastic, if you don't have the instruments to show them that the money that they put in our program, in the restoration program, is successful, and you have the loans about that, I don't know how to say, the frutos, what your gain, so you're not going to do it very well. So for me, finance is not only engage the others, the actors, but to have the framework, to have the instruments, to have a lot of things, a comprehensive, integral program. But also for a vulnerable country, and I'm sorry if I'm going to say it again, but it's also to understand that you need, and that is something that I learned from Karen Kemper, that is so clever, I'm not. that you need to understand that the planet has to be a mosaic. I don't know how to say in English. Different things. And not only go to the big forest. That okay, we need oxygen, of course, but we also need to protect lives. And the people is dying in my country because of the climate change. In this storm, tropical depression, the rain was 1.5 meters in 10 days. More than my ex-husband height. That's why I left him. You remember the husband and I realized that was cheating on me, and the images
you know that,
with high resolution. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that we need to restore. We need to make the people finance.
Normally, I don't interrupt ministers, but you've provided an excellent opportunity for us to move on to Chief
Yes.
Tashka, and I would invite all of you to ask her about her husband in the cocktail.
Okay. In our cosmology, we say everything is moving, everything is sacred. We saw beautiful in every way. And the children and the leaves that come down and the wind. The same thing I say is always opportunity to invest in something good. I used to travel to many places, and I saw so many opportunity for do something great, because now we're not going to be forever here. We need to do something great for other people, for environment. Because as we know, in this 21st century, people just not going to buy something just to buy. They want to know where they come from. What kind of social, economic, environment responsibility they have with the people, with the environment, with the planet. If you don't do that, I think in the next years, nobody going to buy if you don't have something like that. And we are now, right now, we are doing a project with that. Who know from this audience know about acai? Who drink acai one day in their life? Yeah, it's great, yeah? Yeah. We have 1,000 trees in our land. Native acai. And right now, we are doing working, collecting acai, and we are producing acai for local, national, and want exporting to that. And if somebody wants the same thing Aveda is doing right now, remember, every time you go to Aveda store, when you buy this red lipstick, that comes from the Yawanawa community. You are helping preserve 200,000 hectares of the land. Remember, if there's opportunity for you guys, invest in the Yawanawa acai project. When somebody going to drink acai and they will say, wow, this acai comes from the Yawanawa land, they help and support the Yawanawa people, 1,200 people, and also help to save 200,000 hectares of the land. That kind of responsibility we are calling today. It's not just be sitting in your window in front of Central Park doing nothing.
Chief Tosca, you're really close to the cocktail hour. So
sorry.
You're preventing people from getting there. So I just would like everyone to give a big round of applause to a fantastic panel. But in fact, we're not done yet. So we have a few minutes to hear from people in the audience. And feel free to not just ask a question. If you have something that you've been dying to say it, but really quickly. And please say who you are when you say it. Anyone? There's got to be a brave soul out there. If you can just go to the mic, please.
And thanks for bringing that point about smallholder farmers and others who were not in the room today. And just to add another group whom I felt that wasn't in the room are also those focused on issues of urban development, especially in emerging and frontier markets, given that what you expect happening, and as actually said, this came from the former governor of the Africa Development Bank, farming, so agriculture, treat it as a business as opposed to a way of life, and then you can realize its full potential. And he was getting to a point where for most smallholders, it's too small, just land that's simply too small to make a living. And even take India, for example, if development goes on pace, number of farmers will go from 60 million in terms of households to 6 million by mid-century. Where are they all going? Urban development, will they be stuck in poverty or will they have additional opportunities? So the question is how, regardless of where these economies go, how do we actually equip them for whatever the future holds? And for that, so I'm just recommending for future symposia to invite those on the urban development side, whether it be jobs training, industrial development, even leapfrogging infrastructure development to the room.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Go ahead. You've got the mic.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much. I'm Elvis Paul. I work with the Africa Union Commission in Addis Ababa. So I just wanted to talk about the need for, we are here talking about investment, private sector investors in land restoration. And I think my minister is there. I recognize her presence. But I think we've not talked enough about the policy interface. Here we talk a lot about science policy interface. We have not talked enough about private sector policy interface. I know during the opening there was a bit of talk about policy, but those who can drive private investors to invest and those who can make their life impossible are the policymakers. And I think my advice, being in the policy part of things and after being in the development and a bit in the business part of it, is that this discussion, this interface is really, really low. There's a lot of talk about the need for it, but being at the Africa Union, which is the main policy organ on the continent, this interface, there's a huge gap between these two important, very, very important group of these sectors. So my recommendation here at IFC, the investment arm of the World Bank, talk to not only bilaterally, talk to the policymakers at the global level, talk to them at the continental and at the regional level, so that when we are sitting here among ourselves, among investors talking to ourselves, we should know that we are covering our backyard by also talking to the policymakers that are here. I would have loved to see more ministers sitting here. These are those who drive policy. I would have loved to see parliamentarians talking to private investors. I would have loved to see policy officers from various political bodies sitting here and talking to the investors, because that's, in Africa, from where I come from, that is the weakest link. Thank you.
Anyone else? Get in the back here.
Yes, I'm Rafik Nijbrug. I'm a scientist with CIAT. I have a question about assets that I don't quite understand. Last year, the LDN fund was created, Land Degradation Neutrality Fund was announced at the UNCCT COP, $300 million, big win for us. And when I clicked through the links, I found out that this company that's managing this fund is also part of a bigger group of companies that are managing $900 billion of assets. And it dawned on me that even if only 1% of the 900 billion is somehow indirectly driving degradation, we're far from neutrality. We're really, it's a it's a losing battle. So I'm curious, with all the people that know much more about assets and asset management than I do, what is the opportunity to focus the lens, in addition to looking for more funding for restoration, but focusing now on all of the assets that are driving degradation and figuring out how we can improve that somehow and focus on private wealth that is driving degradation? Thanks.
Great. Thanks. We'll take one more and then invite the panel to say a few words. Even better. So does anyone have a reaction, particularly, I think, to the last question? Perhaps, David, you could respond?
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, of course, is that if our economic system is not properly pricing externalities, as we said in the morning, then you just get this steady erosion of natural capital and conversion of that into consumption. And so part of this is getting, the proper price signals and economic signals right, and then capital would flow into the right place. But right now it isn't flowing into the right place, and so that's really one of the fundamental policy challenges is to put that type of externality pricing in place.
And then to wrap up, I've just asked the panel to say one sentence or one word of what they learned today.
One sentence, and it's difficult. I think I'll sound a little bit rude if I use just one sentence. But what I take away from all of this, and what I want to tell the investors in the room, is young people like me who work within the restoration space, probably one thing that we hear the most is, you're too small, we're looking for bigger deals, we are cutting bigger investments, you're too small for us. I'm just asking them to be more innovative. Stop saying that we are too small for you. Find ways in which you can incorporate us. Find ways in which your investments can fit us. And just like the last person mentioned, the Land Degradation Net Neutrality Fund, I hope that when it's fully established, there will be mechanisms of funding small grassroots youth-led activities, organizations. Thank you. I actually guess it was one sentence.
I guess what I would take away from this sitting today and listening to it is that there's just this crazy quilt or flotilla of new business models, new ideas, new people with fresh energy, and it's how that all knits together and really tries to make a change in how we manage all the world's forests and landscapes.
El Salvador is going to be the best example that restore the planet is not only possible, but it's an obligation for all of us. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, so glad to finish on with this wonderful panel, and we'd like to now invite Robert and Karen to come up and give a few final remarks before we end. Thanks, everyone.
Biodiversity is frightening. Well, you reached the time where I am here standing between you and your cocktail, or between you, Karen, and your cocktail. That's where you are asked, so give us your impression of the day and try to summarize something that is inherently impossible to summarize. So I won't even try. I will just give you a sort of a very biased impression I had from the day. The first impression I had is that there was a lot of energy in the room. It was very difficult to have people sitting and talking. People were actively talking, arguing, disagreeing, agreeing. Yeah, you need to do that. No, what you do is, we need to do a lot of boring things. No, it's not boring, it's exciting. Yeah, we have the structure, we just need to use them. We need to break the silos. Yeah, but you also need to be innovative. But you need to innovate for what? So I think there is really something that is boiling here, and that we should build upon that. My personal feeling always when you finish this type of events is the sort of the two words question. Now, so what? What are we going to do with that? Are we going to go back to our place and say, okay, that was nice, and then 48 hours later you will have forgotten that what you have listened and why it was nice, except that you have this feeling that it was nice, and then the next time you see the Global Landscape Forum, say, I'm going to that, so it was nice. But I think we really need to go beyond these events and then use the opportunity that we have had, the discussion. I have many people that I met that normally don't meet. I'm planning to contact them and to see what we can develop together. So I guess for me it was really enriching. It was a very rich day. I haven't seen everything, but for me it was rich. And we had about 200 persons in the room, more or less, on and off. But that's the sort of the tip of the iceberg. We had 150,000 visits to the GLF investment case sites. We had 8,000 people into the live stream during the day. We reached 3.6 million people via social media, Twitter, and so. And we were the hashtag GLFDC 2018 is trending on Twitter and DC today. So it's a bit like the late night show and Jimmy Fallon. I mean, we have been trending for 15 minutes and not today. So I think we can all congratulate ourselves. We did a good job. We need to continue. It's not the end, it's the beginning. And I hope I can count on you to continue for that. I have to also to thank all the people that help us for the live streaming, catering, the C4 team, the World Bank team, the IFC team, everybody. And also I need to thank our main donor, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Forestry in Germany, and all the other donors of the CGIAR fund, and the various partners and founders of the Landscape Forum. Thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to ask Karin Kemper, who is the Senior Director for Environment and Natural Resource Global Practice, to give us a final word. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make it brief and not painful, and the cocktail is waiting for you. I think it has been a day so full of and rich in discussions that indeed it's impossible to capture everything in a few minutes. I'm not going to do that because you'll all go back to the live streams and recorded streams and you can relive it there. And I'd just like to say that at the World Bank, we are not only happy, but we are really honored to have co-hosted this GLF event here in DC at our headquarters. It's great that you all have come, and I certainly have learned a lot. I have 3 takeaways that I would like to leave with you. One is the sense of urgency. We know that if we continue with business as usual, 100 million people will be pushed back into poverty by 2030, which is sort of tomorrow. And by 2050, more than 140 million would be forced to leave their homes in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. So we have an urgent global responsibility to limit the rise in global temperatures to below 2 degrees Celsius. And Robert really this morning, he really made me very, very nervous when he kept talking about the 3-degree world. And I thought, no, we need to continue sticking to the 2-degree world. We really don't want to go to the 3-degree world. So the urgency is really there, and we all have to work to keep warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Now, At the bank, we have an ambitious climate change action plan where we have been ramping up our climate investments, both on mitigation and on adaptation. And in 2017, to give you an idea, we financed a record of 12.8 billion in climate action in developing countries around the world. But I had a takeaway from the Minister of El Salvador today when she said, we need mitigation based on adaptation. And I think that very much epitomizes what, how the forest and landscapes work comes together. And we all know that the mitigation side is not fully explained in climate circles, and that is one of the things that we need to do. So there's a lot of urgency around the entire climate issue and the things that can be done and need to be done in the landscape space. The other thing, on the other hand, is also a sense of excitement. As Robert just said, there has been a lot of energy in the room, in the hallways, in the corridors. And so even if the scale of the challenge before us is truly daunting, and the financing required for a global transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient landscapes can be counted in the trillions and not in the billions, I think this GLF has showed us that there's a lot of things that are in motion already. So I'm very excited to see how the private sector is engaging, how it's helping, how it's committed. Many of the examples shared today, from the Cocoa and Forest Initiative to green bonds in Kenya to blended finance in Colombia, programmatic approaches in Liberia, and all of that shows both the policy side. We've discussed about policy reforms in land tenure, subsidies, payments for environmental services, and so on, how they are needed, and the innovative financing, which was the core of the discussions on blended finance, bonds, impact investors, and so on, to mobilize more private sector funding for sustainable landscapes. So natural capital, which has been a theme during the day, is and needs to be part of a balanced portfolio in a country. And it's very, very fundamental, really, to keep up the wealth of nations and the earth. So where does that leave us? And that's the third and last point, which takes you straight to the cocktail, but it's the most important one. Because none of us can do it alone. That has even become more clear today than ever. And looking forward, there's a large scaling up agenda ahead of us. We need innovation, both in finance, but also in technology. I didn't hear enough about technology today, I have to say. I think that will be a game changer when we build that in fully into the discussion on how to bring about the different financing pieces. We do need to bring in more young people everywhere, both in countries where we are ramping up, and those who are thinking about and getting businesses going and getting finance going and innovation going. And then we need to be persistent. And that also includes bringing in different sectors that go beyond forests and agriculture, and how we link to other investment sectors that we could harness more positively in the forest and landscape space. So for all of that, we need partnerships like the GLF and the Bond Challenge that can bring us all together. I'd like to thank Robert Nazi, the GLF Secretariat, the C4 staff, the GLF organizing partners, the bank staff, the government of Germany that is financing a lot of the GLF. And I'd like to thank all of you, especially those of you who are still in the room and those who are online. And with that, I declare closed the third GLF Investment Symposium, and I invite you all to join us for cocktails in the atrium. Thank you very much.